The burden of proof is always the responsibility of the government in a criminal case. It never shifts to the defendant to have a burden. There are some people that want the police to do a minimal investigation, just enough to make an arrest. And then there's other folks that want the police to do a full investigation, gather all the evidence, because that's what they would want if they were charged with a crime and knew in fact that they were innocent. Let's call this group over here, the ones that want the police to do a minimal investigation, let's call them the minimalists. Is anyone here in the minimalist group? Nobody ever raises their hand. Let's call this group over here the CSI group. Is anyone in the CSI group that wants the police to do a full investigation, gather all the evidence?
I am.
Yes, everybody usually will. Then I say, now the reason why I ask this question is because there are some folks that are willing to give the police a pass for a bad investigation. Or even worse, they'll expect the defendant to produce evidence, or even worse than that, they'll expect the defendant to prove his innocence. Does anybody here expect the defendant to prove his innocence? No, nobody ever raises their hand, and if they do, then we start a conversation about that. Now, folks, I want you all to imagine. I want you to imagine that you've made it onto this jury, that you have no bias, that you've made it onto this jury, and I want you to imagine that the case has been submitted to you. You're in the back, you're deliberating, you're looking at all the evidence, and you're looking at the evidence going, God, I've got all this evidence of guilt, but I'm missing a piece of evidence. Why didn't the government give me that videotape that I know they have, that I know the police gathered? And then let's say another juror comes and says, if that video was so important to the case, then why didn't the defendant bring it? Don't you think you might have an obligation to say something to that juror? And I'll point somebody out and they'll say yes. And I'll say, and do you think you might say something if we're missing a piece of evidence? That's never the defendant's fault. That's always the fault of the government. If people are missing evidence, if there's evidence that's missing that's causing the jury to have a reason to doubt, and that can be a reason to doubt is a lack of evidence, then it is never the defendant's fault. It's not their obligation to produce any evidence. It's always the obligation of the government. And if they don't give a jury a full picture, if they don't produce all evidence, I always say, what are you hiding? Why didn't you produce it? Because it's not our problem. It's not our fault. It's yours. And this is how criminal cases go. Because the government has all the power. I don't care if you're Diddy. I don't care if you're the richest person in the world. You do not have as much power as the government. They have way more resources. They have way more money. It should work this way. It should always be the burden of the prosecution.